Sobia, Dr. Sobia Shaikh, among other things, faculty member at Memorial, co-chair the Anti-Racism Coalition, ARC, in Newfoundland and Labrador, the Addressing Islamophobia project, the Quilted Collective of Racialized Writers, and the BIPOC Creators Collective. My great pleasure. Over to you, Dr. Sobia Shaikh.
Hi, thank you, Dr. McGregor, Courtney, and other panelists for such interesting presentations about COVID and women and gender diverse people who face multiple interlocking forms of oppression. Next slide. My presentation today is about the crisis of trust that many of us who identify as women and gender diverse people and those who identify as Indigenous, Black, migrants, and or racialized women, and the work that we must do in order to ensure feminist racial justice lens, both here in Newfoundland and Labrador and across the world. I want to start off by saying that the intended audience of my presentation is explicitly Indigenous, Black, migrant, and other racialized women and gender diverse people. Next slide. COVID laid bare the inability of our public institutions and the organizations who are meant to support or protect or serve us. Next. Let me be clear, our lack of trust did not start nor will it end with the pandemic. The pandemic highlighted and amplified the failures of these systems. In Newfoundland and Labrador, for example, particularly in St. John's during Snowmageddon, we got a preview of this inequality. And many women and people of all genders came together to provide mutual aid to one another. For those of us who are racialized, we came to understand even the inadequacies of these initiatives, as they often relied on already existing networks. And for people who are oppressed because of ableism, classism, transphobia, stigmatization based on the work that they do, these networks may not yet exist. Next. The pandemic brought also a global awareness of the brutality and violence being experienced by Indigenous and Black and Asian and Muslim and migrant communities. Next. And brought us to an understanding that without intentional solidarity, that feminist racial justice is just not possible. Next. Our collective vision must counter the crisis of trust that we have experienced and must work towards an intentional and collective solidarity in order to build brick by brick, moment by moment, communities in which trust is deserved. Next. I center in this vision, in this visioning, Black, Indigenous, migrant, and racialized women and gender diverse people, both locally and globally. Next. Sorry about too many slides. For those of us working in intentional anti-racist communities, there are three main parts of this vision. First, we need to develop an intention of working within and across our communities if we are going to counter racialized harm. This must be an intentional focus on building relationships and trust. Second, we need to develop and hold space for dismantling systems that do not serve us. We do this by believing our own and each other's experience of harm. It is understandable and desirable to want to undo systems which repeatedly harm us. And finally, we must invest in people who face daily racisms in order to build community. We need to reject any and all empty visions and ideals which do not actively work to build relationships nor make any real change. Next. In the last few slides, I've listed a few practices that we in the anti-racist community in this province have found helpful. So first, the main intention is to create space to talk to one another, both within our own racialized communities and across other intersectional communities. We need to de-escalate violence. We need to heal and support. We need to attend to everyday racist hurts. And don't let anyone minimize or gaslight this important work, nor experiences of harm. And perhaps most difficultly, we have to address the harms that we do to others. to reflect, listen, reflect, fix, reflect, do better, reflect, and so on. Next.
Uh-oh.
We have to believe in our own skills and capacity to respond to the problems we face. Women and gender diverse people who face racism, income insecurity, transphobia, stigmatization are excellent problem solvers. Give each other resources, space, education, validation, whatever we need to mobilize our own strengths. As Mariam Kaba says, we do this until we free us. Last, normalize asking people in groups to be better, to be more accountable to one another. Our collective survival depends on it.
Dr. Shaikh, thank you so much. I can't wait for your policy. We're about to enter into the finale